SKORNorth.com.
Time for the Tuesday bonus scoop. Zolgad, Darren Doogie Wilson from Channel 5 Eyewitness News, and of course Score North, our scoop master. Declan Goff is always executive producing everything across the wide variety of Score North shows. And Doogie, what's going on? How you doing today?
I'm doing okay, Judd. I just told you off, Mike. I am now fully vaccinated as of about 2 hours ago. I'm also dealing with some sunburn. I didn't realize on May 23rd, I'm sitting outside at Drugie's baseball tournament in Brooklyn Park over the weekend. I didn't realize how potent the sun is. So seriously, like I need a lesson in how to apply SPF 40. I am burnt. I don't know if this does it any justice. And for those who just listen, don't watch the YouTube clip. They can't see me holding up my arm. I am severely burnt, Declan.
I played 18 on Saturday with no sunscreen as well. And let's just say during the Wild playoff game on Saturday, it was me, the Wild television game, and aloe in front of my air conditioner for about 3 hours. That's all I did on Saturday night, and I won't say anything more. Aloe
is one of the better inventions of the last
it really
decade
is.
Plus. Maybe even it goes back further than that.
It kind of makes
aloe
sunburn.
Is great. Mm-hmm.
It honestly makes sunburn somewhat a little bit worth it. Just a little bit.
I don't know if I'd say that, but it makes it feel okay.
Sunburn,
I love aloe.
Don't screw around with that.
Well, that's why you're the ultimate endorsement, right, Judd? Like,
my
you
advice,
don't go outside.
Stay on your couch.
Like, on
Here's
occasion, I guess you taught yourself how to mow your lawn,
That's right.
Put the oil in and get the lawnmower started up. So Dawn must have taught you something, Judd. But outside of you mowing your lawn, it's not like you're hanging out outside.
No, because it's dangerous out there.
Exactly.
It's the sun, bugs, grass itself, itchy. No, I'm out. All right, let's start here. Speaking of the great outdoors, Vikings OTAs started officially as far as the workouts that they can do on the field, and it does sound like they had a good turnout on Monday. Talk to me about the note that you sent me yesterday about the absence, and these are voluntary, just to be clear. So this is not a mandatory camp. The absence of Danielle Hunter and what you think that means in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, Danielle Hunter, my understanding, has not been there, was not there last week. Things ramped up on Monday with on-field activity. He was not there. When we have media access, speaking of being outdoors, on Wednesday morning, I don't expect to see him out there. The question is the mandatory minicamp, because you're right, Judd. Let's stress that this is voluntary right now, but it is mandatory come June, the June minicamp. Will he be on the field or pay the fines? That is the big question. Judd, I know that he has talked to multiple people inside TCO Performance Center. I know Mike Zimmer went on the record a few weeks ago suggesting he had not talked to Danielle. Let's just put it this way. If we're to believe everything a coach, this isn't just Mike Zimmer specific, but if we are to believe everything a coach, an executive, a player in this market tells us, heck, across the country, if you're that gullible, then I have oceanfront property in Coon Rapids to sell to you. You can't be that stupid, right? So we get lied to on a regular basis. I'm led to believe that Mike Zimmer and Danielle Hunter have talked at some point. Sure, he's communicated with Andre Patterson and others. Let's not forget the NFL Network report going back to last October. I don't think anything has changed in that regard. I'm told specifically by a couple people that it's the Joey Bosa contract that irks, and maybe it's more so Danielle's agent, because I've told you, Judd, my sense from those multiple people who know Danielle is he's not a me type guy. He's not one that likes the spotlight, but his representation feels like he is vastly underpaid. He is now, the numbers better than I do, but he is not among the top 17, 18 paid pass rushers in the game. That Joey Bosa contract, I don't have the details right here in front of me, but that Chargers contract that Joey Bosa got, I know that the Danielle Hunter camp looks at that and says, whoa, okay, if Joey Bosa got that, we're certainly worth more than that.
What do you think right now the Viking stance is on his contract then?
Well, I mean, does he have much leverage, right? Coming off a very serious injury, a very serious surgery, although all surgeries to me are pretty darn serious. But in this case, the neck surgery, really, really serious. Like, does he have leverage? Is he really willing to sit out to make a statement? I will tell you this much. Somebody that knows some things, not real close to Danielle Hunter, but close to some other LSU folks. I texted with this individual this morning, Judd. It's this individual's belief that Danielle isn't going to pay fines. That when it's mandatory, he is going to be in Egan.
Oh, okay. So that's fine then. I mean,
That doesn't
if
mean
he'll
that's
show
fact.
up.
I'm just telling you,
Right.
as we do this
Yeah.
this weekly podcast, I'm here to pass along information I receive. Heck, am I lied to on occasion? 100%.
On
But there's stuff
occasion.
I'm told that I don't even share with you guys because, my radars go up and I say, okay, that's BS.
Yep.
I'm not even going to say a word. In this instance, I trust the individual who
Mhm.
opined to me, maybe a little bit more opining, not fact, but he knows a lot of LSU folks. He's got some mutual friends with Danielle. It's this person's take as of this morning that Danielle is not going to pay fines, which means he will be there when it is mandatory.
According to the Over the Cap website, Darren, Joey Bosa is making on average now $27 million per year. You've got to go down quite a ways to find the average per year for Danielle's contract is 14.4 mil. So like that's the gap. That's the gap. What do you think or how much of a role do you think it plays? Danielle's contract is clearly not up. So the circumstances is a bit different. But you know as well as I do that since the Wilfs bought the team in 2005, they really do take care of players. Like, and to be clear, players they like a lot and they're young. So it's not altruistic, but it is certainly been a trend. And that includes Dalvin Cook last year, who they basically must have told at some point in time, calm down, we'll get this done. And they eventually did. Do you think that plays a role here, or because Hunter's contract is not up and it might set a little bit of a precedent if they went in and redid it, that this is an outlier to those contracts?
I don't know if it's an outlier because Adam Thielen did have multiple years left on his contract. Correct me if I'm wrong, Judd, but Adam Thielen had multiple years left in his contract a couple of years ago when they redid his deal. So there is a little bit of a precedent. I've told you for weeks that I do believe in the end they take care of Danielle. Now, who knows, Judd? Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't have a sense that talks have picked up. Heck, the Vikings still need to extend Harrison Smith. That's something they want to do. They still need to extend Brian O'Neill. That is something they want to do. Both those guys entering the final years of their contracts. But I'm just telling you, I do think in the end that the Vikings find a way to take care of Danielle. Now, will they take care of him to the extent of what you just laid out from Over the Cap, getting him right up to the Joey Bosa number? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But I get it from the Hunter camp, even coming off a serious injury. Like the Chargers, hey, I don't know about that contract. Bosa is a good player, but that seems like a bit of an overplay pay. So, hey, good play by Bosa's representation. But like, I get it. If you're Danielle and his representation, you're looking at that and saying, what the bleep? Like, how the heck did Joey Bosa?
But that's your fault too. That's your fault. The Vikings gave you a smart contract, and you could have said no. So, and I'm sure that's been pointed out to his rep. And it was interesting to backtrack to the springtime too, Dukes, where somebody came out. I forget, was it a tweet or something, and implied that Danielle should change representation, and Danielle jumped on that. Oh, it was Chad Graff's piece in The Athletic wrote about the agent, and Danielle came right back, and the one chirp that he had was, "I'm not going to change agents." So I thought that was an interesting dynamic, that it's not like he's going to go hire Neil Cornrich or Jimmy Sexton or something.
Correct.
And have
but
him
I'll
fight
also
the
say
battle.
this, that everything else that Chad wrote is spot on.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay. Yeah, on Danielle, I have never heard that Danielle was seeking out new representation. So yes, and Zeke, the guy who represents Danielle, also has Odell Beckham Jr. He's got some ins in Baton Rouge with the LSU football program. Not every in there. LSU produces so many NFL players on a yearly basis, but this particular agent, who's based in Arizona, has some ins with the LSU football program. So I don't have a sense that Danielle has ever thought about changing representation, but I'm just telling you, if you go back to that Chad Graff piece,
Yep.
which maybe was reiterating some of the stuff that Ian Rappaport put out there in October, but it had some sourcing behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling you, there's some smoke there. There is. Chad wasn't barking up the wrong tree on that report.
Jeff Gladney, are we going to see him soon? And is he close to any type of legal resolution to the domestic abuse charges that came down in Dallas?
Well, he's not there. I'm told he's not there. In terms of that, I can tell you, I had somebody in our news department check with the Dallas District Attorney's Office middle of last week. They still had not made a determination on whether to charge him or not. But that update goes back a few days. I think it's worth me or somebody else following up on that this week. That at some point here, the DA's office needs to make some sort of determination one way or another, right?
Yep.
Like, it's
Absolutely.
been long enough. Decide whether you're going to charge him or not. So, they had, Breland, the former chief cornerback, in last week. Does that tell us anything? Although my understanding, Judd, is they offered him a 1-year deal. I don't know if it was for the vet minimum. It might have been for a tick above the vet minimum. But clearly, Breland hasn't agreed to terms with the Vikings, so they didn't offer him enough money. So if they want Breland, they're going to have to go at least a little bit higher. But can we read between the lines of them bringing in a guy with all sorts of starting experience, where even if Gladney isn't charged, that the Vikings likely presume that Gladney is facing some sort of lengthy suspension.
Yep.
Is that 6 games? Is that 8 games? Is that 4 games? But multiple games that I think the Vikings are bracing for that scenario to play out, regardless of what takes place in the city of Dallas.
I think you're right. Yep. And that's the concern, is that the league can basically step in and say, okay, he didn't get charged, or he's not in as much trouble as they expected, but bang, here's 4 games. So where do you think right now, priority wise, where do you think things stand for the Vikings to add guys? So cornerback for sure. We've talked about defensive tackle. Like if they've got a list at TCO of needs and wants to fill with potential veteran guys who you could probably get right now for a little cheaper, because guys are going to have to accept the fact they're not going to break the bank as we head towards June 1st. How do you think they prioritize positions of need still?
Well, yeah, now we know for sure cornerback. I still think there's enough defensive linemen on the market. Like, they've kicked the tires on Geno Atkins. There's nothing that's changed on that front. So that's certainly a name to watch. There's still some pass rushers out there, right? Melvin Ingram, Everson Griffin. I mean, there's some guys out there. There's other names too. I just happen to spew 2 there. But if you look at the list of available free agent pass rushers, I would say that's still, even after Ryan Kerrigan came off the board, who the Vikings kicked the tires on, but I'm told did not make an offer to. But even after Kerrigan comes off the board, there's still enough names there. And they've kicked the tires on D.D. Westbrook. So we know wide receiver to some extent. Could that eventually be Larry Fitzgerald Jr.? Is it D.D.? Is it some other wide receiver? But I think wide receiver potentially. But I also think, Judd, even without the pads on, like, they probably can formulate stronger opinions the next few weeks, like get through that mandatory mini camp, see how the next few weeks go, then really get into the meeting room and say, okay, like, we've seen enough on the practice field the last few weeks. Here's what we truly need.
Do you think that there's a chance that they would have a conversation, and, to use your term, Dukes, kick the tires on Julio Jones now? The contract's big. The contract's too big, but it's a fun name to throw out there.
Oh, it's a fantastic name to throw out there. And they certainly have, to use my terminology, it's a cliche, but whatever. They've kicked the tires on some big names in the past, right? So, like, it's not unheard of for this regime, to at least make the phone call. But no, I don't have a sense that they're going down that path. Like, and hey, you could argue a wide receiver of that magnitude, sure, like, figure it out. Who cares about whether Justin Jefferson gets his 10 targets a game and Adam Thielen gets his 9 to 10 targets a game? Like, if you have a chance to bring in Julio Jones in this very much all-in season, why not do it, even if you're a run-first offense? So I'm not disputing the notion that you can make a case that the Vikings should pursue Julio Jones, but I'm just telling you factually, from what I can gather, there's zero steam there. I just, you look at his cap hit, you look at what Atlanta is asking for in terms of compensation. Now, I don't think Atlanta's getting a first-round pick for Julio Jones. They may ultimately have to settle for a 2 or maybe even a 3, but that's still pretty heavy compensation. Like, I would be surprised if Rick Spielman gave up a really good draft pick to bring on that sort of cap hit.
Yeah, and the only team that, if you're the Vikings, I take it that you'd like to keep him away from if possible is the Packers. And the Packers would make perfect sense, but here's the thing. If the Packers traded for Jones, I would be absolutely shocked, just because they don't make trades like that. I mean, they don't sign guys like that ordinarily. They don't make trades. So the logical thing would be the Packers pursue, and, let's say give up a second round pick, Dukes, for Jones, bring him in, tell Aaron, we love you, come back, look at this. You got Devontae Adams and Julio Bleeping Jones. That's pretty good. But Green Bay just doesn't show itself to be the type of team that would trade for a guy like that, which might make no sense. But until I see it, I won't believe it.
Well, there's also this too. I mean, if you're Atlanta, you might still feel like with Matt Ryan at quarterback that you're not that far off. Now, maybe that's foolish, but they may feel like, hey, we can make a run. Do we really want to trade Julio within the conference? Would it make more sense to trade Julio to the Patriots or to the Tennessee Titans, even though that's a run-first offense? But outside of A.J. Brown, you mean to tell me the Tennessee Titans with my buddy Todd Downing calling plays down there? You mean to tell me Todd wouldn't love to have Julio Jones? Trust me, Todd would love to have Julio Jones. Those would be two teams, and there's probably more, but those would be two teams I would keep an eye on. I certainly think Julio wants out. I think that was, the audio with Shannon Sharp, that had to be pre-planned. I would hope.
Yeah,
there was a method to that madness, right?
Yes.
So Julio knew he was on live TV, knew what he was saying, and when he's saying I want the heck out, I get it. So I mean, I can absolutely see a trade at some point, but I think maybe if I had to bet, I'd lean more on him going to an AFC team, not an NFC team.
Where to next, scoop-wise? You want to go Twins? You want to go Wolves? You tell me.
Well, we could go any number of directions. I spent a bunch of time on, what day was it? Friday on campus with Gophers basketball coach Ben Johnson. Then all of a sudden, or maybe it was Thursday, then all of a sudden he adds a big man transfer from Stephen F. Austin. He adds a JUCO transfer, a guard from Florida, Abdullah, who I talked to, that's his first name. I'll botch the pronunciation on his last name, but he's a really good shooter, played at a really good JUCO program for 1 year, played at a really good high school program. I know Ben is fired up about that kid coming aboard, but he'll need some time. I'm told he really needs to add some serious strength. The Stephen F. Austin transfer, I think he's more a backup, but they need some front court help, right? With Parker Fox out for the season in all likelihood, coming off the torn ACL, Trayton Thompson coming in as a true freshman, a big man from Alexandria. Is Trayton going to be ready right away to play decent minutes? Probably not. So you start looking at the front court and you're like, okay, you need some help there, right? So they're continuing to pursue. He still has multiple scholarships, Ben, that is, to play with. He's still after Sterling Manley, a big man transfer from North Carolina, and he's absolutely still after Steph Mitchell, the power forward transfer, but he can guard multiple positions. He's from Shakopee. He was at Boston College. Good player the last 2 years in the ACC. I can see them landing Mitchell. That would be a really good get. Steph Mitchell, if he comes and joins the Gophers after he goes through the NBA pre-draft process, if he does indeed in the end choose the Gophers, and I'm telling you, I would make the Gophers the betting favorite on that front. He would start, he'd play 30 minutes a night. So the roster is still incomplete, but things are about to ramp up. Calendar flipping to June next week. Ben's going to welcome a bunch of recruits on campus early next week. A lot of the local guys, a lot of the 2022, 2023 players. He can start hitting the road here pretty quick to watch some of these AAU tournaments. He can start working with his current roster June 14th. So Gopher basketball, things are starting to ramp up.
What's their concern, Doogie, about this? Coming out of the pandemic when you didn't have fans and the program fires its coach. And I feel like we're back to a point of, if not apathy, lack of interest in Gopher basketball, which again, we've had this discussion 1,000 times. If they're good, they're a big deal. They'll pack the barn. It's fantastic. What's the concern, do you think, on Mark Coyle's part, that, and this is not Ben Johnson's fault, but it's very clear that they might not be good. I mean, they could be awful. When you're going to come out of a pandemic, the competition for the sports dollar in this town is enormous. I mean, there's teams, left and right. And one of your heritage programs is going to potentially be terrible and not really give people a justification to buy tickets.
Well, even if they're good, I'm not quite sure people are yearning to go to the barn. It's a very, very old crowd. Like even my father-in-law, like he might be on the younger side in his section. He just gave up his season tickets, third row center court. Like you think about the Gold M, he had a couple seats in the M.
He gave him
You know,
up?
the tickets had been in his family forever. He gave them up. Like he just prefers to watch on TV. You know, he was struggling to sell them going back a couple years ago.
Yes.
You know, he'd throw us a game or two, and he still can. He has connections over there. He can still track down, and obviously I can too. Track down some tickets if I want to take the boys to a game or two. But
Sure.
like just with our schedules, it's hard to get to 18, 19 games. You know, and sometimes the start times, you know, like you may not know a start time until a couple days before. Just there's a lot of headaches in that regard. So even if they're good, I think there's a struggle to especially get younger people into the barn. But on the possibility of them being bad, yeah, I'm not dismissing that. Yeah, they could be pretty bad. I will tell you this much, though. Ben does feel like if you look at the roster, there was a strategy behind this. He doesn't have a player shorter than 6'3". And the guard they just got a couple days ago, the JUCO transfer, is 6'3". Otherwise, before that, everybody he's brought on board, 6'4" or taller. He feels like he's got a lot of guys that have high basketball IQ, that they're not going to curl up in the fetal position in the clutch, you know, crunch time. And he also feels like with their length, they'll be able to defend. That, you know, he's tried to bring in shooters and feels like they'll be able to certainly shoot better than Pitino's teams, you know, at least last year, but even going back multiple years. But that he feels like with their defensive length, that they'll be able to steal some games on defense. Now, we'll see if that turns out to be true. But I'm just telling you, I still need to see who else he brings in. There's more coming. Even after these 2 additions in the last 5 days,
it's unbelievable.
More coming to his roster. So let me see. Like, I'm confident going to get Mitchell, but that's not 100%. But if they end up getting Mitchell, you've got him at one forward. You got Jamison Battle at another forward. You've got Peyton Willis as the starting point guard, but that doesn't mean much. That's just him bringing up the ball, initiating the offense. You've got E.J. Stevens or Luke Lowe at the other guard spot. The other one will come off the bench, play heavy minutes. Then who starts at the 5? Can they get Manley to start at the 5? If your starting lineup is Manley, Mitchell, Battle, let's say it's Luke Lowe and Peyton Willis, that's not a train wreck, Judd. I'm not suggesting that's, you know, a top 5 team in the Big Ten. It's not. Mm-hmm. But I also don't think it's the 12 seed, you know, in the Big Ten tournament. I think they could be better than that. So let me just see what else Ben does here to add to the front court.
Fair enough. On the Twins, so they've started to play better of late, but we've also in the past, I think since we did the scoop last Tuesday, Dukes, we've also started to see some rumblings from national baseball reporters, JP Morosi, Feinsand, about the potential that the Twins could be one of the first teams to start trading guys, Pineda, Cruz. JP Morosi mentioned Berrios as a possibility, and I'd like to start there. So here's my feeling on him. I don't want to trade him. Like I like him. I think he's not what we expected he was going to be, but he's still damn good. And so far, until we're proven wrong, this franchise, as it's currently constructed with Falvey and Levine, hasn't exactly developed a ton of its own pitching yet. Now that might come. I don't know. My point is I'd like to keep Berrios, but he has an incredible value going into July because he does have a year left on his contract. And we've talked about this before. We don't know if there's going to be baseball in 2022. If you're the Twins, don't you have to quietly at least go to the Berrios camp right now and say, what can we do here? Because if they make it clear, listen, we want to get paid. We will be talking to the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Mets. You might say, okay, he's gone then. So just with Berrios being first, what's your feeling about how this is going to play out? Because I don't want to trade him, but I could see their hand being forced. And last thing, I don't expect Buxton and Berrios are both back. I think it's probably one of the two. I don't know it's both. That's going to be a huge price tag.
I would keep Berrios too. And you're right. I mean, whether there's a 2022 season or not, you could still maximize his trade value by trading him right now to a team that would have him then for 2 playoff runs, right? You'd have him for this year, and if there is a season next year, and if there's not, that team at least gets him for this run. Judd, they've had a number of conversations with Joel Wolf, his agent. They've tried. I can't tell you if they've had talks in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but they've had a number of dialogues going back over 2 years. They have tried to extend him. Yes, very much on their terms, but I'm just telling you, they have tried really, really hard to extend him. I think ideally they'd like to find a happy medium and keep him. I think some of it is what you said. Like, okay, Happ isn't back next year. Shoemaker isn't back. Is Pineda back? Maybe there's some interest, but no guarantees as he's a pending free agent. So you start looking at the rotation even for next year. There's a few holes there, right? Maybe Dobnak can be your number 5, but you're still looking at least 2 holes, right? Kintameda back, okay, but you still have multiple holes to fill. Balazovic is not real far off, but I don't know if you can pencil him into the 2022 opening day rotation. And I'm just basing this dialogue, Judd, on the idea that at some point they can come to some agreement on an extension. But you're right. Those talks in December, it may take until April, May, June, who knows about the 2022 season. But let's base our conversation right now on the idea that there will be a 2022 season. Sure. If there is, opening day, Jordan Balazovic is not going to be, I don't believe, ready to be in the opening day rotation. Not far off, but I don't think he'll be ready. Duran, who hit 101 on the radar gun over at CHS Field the other day, he could potentially be ready, but if you've got him and Dobnak, that's still a slippery slope, I think, but there are some guys. And certainly the shutdown of last year, it hurt everybody, but it certainly hurt them. But I think you need to listen. I guess it depends on what are the Blue Jays offering, what's, another organization offering for Jose Berrios. But I'm just telling you, they have tried to extend him. But you're right. He also, I think a lot of us had expectations that eventually, as he's now, 26, 27, that he would be a true, at least, lockdown, rock solid number 2 type guy. I'm not quite sure he's a number 2 on a really good team. Just you look at the numbers, the third time through a lineup, how often does he get you into the 7th inning? It just doesn't happen very often. He's good, but he's not a superstar, but he may be looking for close to superstar type money. So I think you continue to engage. I think you play this thing out, at least for this year, see where things stand in the winter. And if you can't get him extended, maybe shop him at the winter meetings. But I'm not saying they won't. I guess I would be mildly surprised. But like if Toronto wants to blow their socks off and offer, Toronto's got some pretty good pitching prospects. If Toronto wants to offer a couple of those guys, if you're Derek and Thad, you're going to listen. But I also think, the Morrissey steam, the Feinsad steam, like that's coming from other organizations. That's not coming from the Twins. The Twins they're not actively shopping guys right now. I can just tell you that for a fact. Here on May 25th, they are not actively shopping guys. But I can also tell you, now some of it's just routine scouting, but they have a bunch of scouts out at AA games, at single A games, right? They're writing reports on a lot of guys on other teams in other organizations. So, they'll be fully prepared, if that time comes. And heck, even with this run that they're on, this mini run, these next 12 games against the Orioles and Royals, and I think they're going to end up winning a bunch of these games. Like this 13-game stretch against the Orioles and Royals, like I can easily see them winning 9 or 10 of these 13 games. But the issue still is, Judd, they have so many teams that they need to climb over, right? Like the White Sox are not necessarily slowing down.
How many teams
I still think the Royals are okay, even if the Twins can beat the Royals some of these games the next couple weeks.
Yep.
The Indians, with enough starting pitching, even if the offense is putrid, the Indians can still find a way to win some games and at least stay relevant to some degree. Then you look at the wild card standings, the amount of teams they need to jump over. Like, look at the Blue Jays, look at the American League East, right? The Red Sox are better than I thought they would be. The Yankees are good. The Blue Jays, even though they're on a losing streak, are not bad. The Tampa Bay Rays are on, a 10 or 11 game winning streak, right? I still think the Astros are decent. Then you look at the Oakland A's, they're good. I'm just saying, you start looking at the wild card standings, show me the path to them being one of the 2 wild card teams. The easier path is probably winning the division, but that's still really hard. So at some point, realistically speaking, Derek and Thad are going to have that tough conversation and say, okay, like, let's look at our roster. Maybe the bats can carry us to some extent.
Yeah.
Like the offense is coming alive. I think their offense can represent them fine. Their offense can be upper echelon in the league, but that they don't have enough pitching with inevitably more injuries to come with all the injuries we've seen so far, that there are going to be more injuries to come, even though they are getting healthier. Like Byron Buxton, I fully expect him back in the lineup next week. Jorge Polanco doesn't need surgery on the ankle. He'll be okay. We saw him pinch run late in last night's game. Nelson Cruz, the wrist is sore. Yeah, well, yeah, the Polanco ankle.
Just chronic.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to 19. So
I know.
Yeah, there is cause for concern, but right now they've ruled out another surgery.
Okay.
So, he was swinging a hot bat. So at some point, Polanco should be back in the lineup. Arise, what's it, a sore shoulder? But they don't view that as a long-term. Kepler with the hamstring, they don't view that as any sort of long-term. So they will get healthy here pretty quick. But Judd, it's darn near inevitable that at some point more of these guys are going to break down in the coming week. So at some point, that realistic conversation has to take place. Derek and Thad saying, okay, it's time for us to start taking these phone calls. Let's be realistic here. Let's start selling, especially the pending free agents.
How do you, because they're going to have to do this, how do you go about, no matter who comes back, keeping Larnach and Kirilloff in the lineup as much as possible?
Well, you keep them in the lineup, right? So if that means Miguel Sano is sitting against some righty pitchers, so be it. And Kirilloff's playing first base. Fine, right? Like, I could even argue the way Garlick and Refsnyder are playing, they probably deserve at-bats, but they're not long-term functional pieces, maybe as a fourth outfielder type. But, if you got to send those guys back down, you take advantage of those two roster spots. I mean, you could foresee at some point in outfield of Buxton in center, Kirilloff in left, Larnach in right. Roll with that. Like, I just know this much. Kirilloff and Larnach need to play every day. And I think the Twins realize that.
Kirilloff, I prefer at first base.
And, hey, that's fine. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I still think they're going to find Miguel Sano some at-bats. But that would also be a conversation. I don't think Miguel Sano has much trade value at all. But would any team bite, that this recent stretch, that they feel like there's something salvageable there, that he's got 38 to 42 home run upside, that some team that could use some power, would they bite at all? Like, that's another example of something the Twins at least need to explore. When you bring up the Berrios example, I'll cite the Miguel Sano example.
How about this? How about Larnach in left, Buxton health provided, because you always have to say that in center, Kepler in right, Kirilloff at first, Cruz in Tampa Bay, and Sano, you just ride as your DH.
Well, yeah, and I left out Kepler in my, scenario longer term, where maybe you need to start thinking about, if Kepler's got the most trade value, maybe that's something you would consider, that some organization would love to have that swing. I mean, Kepler's swing, as much as I love Kirilloff's swing, Kepler's swing is almost as beautiful as Kirilloff's swing.
Right.
So maybe you would entertain that idea. But sure, maybe your best 9 entails Kirilloff at first with Kepler in right, Larnach in left, but then you still have the conundrum of what to do with Louis Arise, that you want Arise's bat
Yeah, it's true.
in the lineup. So what do you do there? Now, I suppose that is a good problem to have. I'm just telling you, though, especially after Larnach's long home run last night against a good lefty, John Means, parking that way up there in deep center field. Like, Trevor Larnach needs to be in the lineup every day. Alex Kirilloff, the way he's squaring up balls, I know the batting average doesn't jump, but look at the way he's squaring up balls. Look at exit velocity. Like, Alex Kirilloff is a stud. I told you a year ago, and it's not like I was going out on a limb, but I told you a year ago for a write that down that at some point Alex Kirilloff is going to win a batting title. I feel stronger about that statement today than I did a year ago. Like, I think Alex Kirilloff is off the charts good. So, and I'm telling you, he's got many, many fans in that organization. Like, there's been many teams that have asked about Kirilloff in trade talks the last couple of years. I'm not saying the Twins made him completely off limits, but the Twins weren't trading Alex Kirilloff. They wanted to see that bat in the lineup, so they're going to continue to ride Kirilloff. As long as the wrist stays okay, they're going to continue to play Kirilloff the rest of the season.
When do A-Rod and Mark Laurie Doogie go to a podium with Glenn Taylor, and when do we get the glorious A-Rod press conference?
I saw A-Rod on Instagram on Saturday. he's always got the Wolves gear. He had a Wolves hoodie on. He's got the Wolves golf shirt. He's certainly
That logo,
showing, hey, I'm the
redesigned.
Wolves owner.
I guarantee you, they
Yeah.
will redesign the logo.
Well, many of these organizations end up doing it, just about every year or every other year because they can, there's a revenue stream there that you can end up, benefiting from. So, yeah, I would not be shocked by that. I think to answer your question, Judd, Glenn, when I talked to Glenn Taylor last week, he told me, the league will approve the sale at an upcoming regularly scheduled, board of governors meeting, or maybe it's all owners meeting. They have regular meetings that at some point here, whether it's June or July, sometime in the next, handful of weeks, that approval is going to come. Glenn told me he's bringing A-Rod and Lori on board, to start being involved in the organization even before the league officially approves the transaction. But to answer your question, I foresee that happening sometime after the official approval by the NBA. Now, whether that's mid-July, late July, would they wait until Summer League and do it in Vegas, in August? Would they wait until closer to, training camp, sometime in early October? It looks like the NBA is going to go back to their normal schedule for next season. Like, I can't tell you the exact date, but at some point it is going to happen. I'm just telling you, I don't see it happening before the league officially approves the transaction.
Gotcha. Final scoop, sir.
Well, I mean, heck, where do you want to go? I mean,
well, you tell me. It's your show.
We go any number of directions. I've been asked about whether, all of a sudden with the Wild hosting Game 6 here on Wednesday night, is there any chance, the governor would in the next 24 hours say, hey, let's get, 12,000 people in the arena?
Vegas
I'm just telling you the short answer. No. There's no buzz. There's no buzz on that. There just isn't. I checked this morning. So
no appetite to do it is the phrase.
A lot would have to change in the next, 12 to 18 hours, probably even less than that, for all of a sudden there to be 10, 11, 12,000 people at the X on Wednesday night. I'm trying to think what else, Judd. I mean,
hey, how about
we're 100 days out from the Gopher football opener. I know there's a lot of buzz. Gophers, Ohio State on September 2nd. I heard a lot of good things coming off spring ball. I mean, this is a veteran-laden team. The guys that are going to be on the field have all sorts of experience. I'm sure PJ Fleck will still cite that it's a young roster, but overall, it's a very experienced roster. So I can just tell you, coming off the spring game and spring ball, because we haven't touched on Gophers football the last few weeks, I know there's a lot of excitement on campus that they feel like they're much closer to the 2019 team than the 2020 team that just last year was so weird in so many ways, from the Big Ten reversing its decision to play on down, Rashad Bateman, fighting off COVID, then Bateman opting out at the end, the Gophers being shut down with a mini COVID outbreak, just all the weirdness of last year. I just know they feel like that's in the rearview mirror, that they feel like this 2021 roster is very much comparable to their 2019 roster when they made a serious run for the Big Ten West Championship.
Last thing, what is your gut feeling about how the Zach Parise Wild era ends?
He wants a buyout.
Last night.
Yeah, he wants a buyout. I can just tell you that. He doesn't want to be here next year.
Okay.
He said all the right things publicly after Game 4. I commend him for that. I can tell you, though, going back multiple weeks, he was hoping to talk to us, right? There were requests put in with the Wild's PR people for him to do a Zoom with us, and it never took place because I think there was some fear that he may create, for lack of a better way of saying it, a bleep storm, But he said all the right things after Game 4. I do know I don't think it's universal. I can't say I've talked to every player on background, but I can tell you from a couple players on background, they felt like Parise, with his playoff experience, should have been in the lineup from Game 1. That there was a miscalculation by Bill Guerin and Dean Evison to not have Parise in the lineup starting Game 1, but that they're grateful that Parise is now, in the lineup. He scores there in Game 5. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fascinating situation to keep an eye on once the season ends. But I can tell you, his representation, they absolutely are going to push for a buyout. It's hard to see any trade actually coming to fruition. So, he's either here and on the Wild's cap, or they buy him out and they're still taking some cap hits in that regard, and not small cap hits, by the way. So You know, you can make a case that a buyout doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're the Wild, but just to free him, do him the favor, Craig Leopold, you know, maybe Zach and his representation even go that far up the flagpole, you know, go to Craig directly if they need to, but just try to come to a happy medium on a buyout and get him the heck out of here, and he can go finish his career somewhere else.
Great stuff, sir. Talk to you next week, okay?
Okay, see you, Judd. Declan, feel better.